I'd never been good at science. Numbers and formulas just didn't click for me the way they did for some people. So when I walked into that college chemistry class my freshman year, I felt like a fish out of water. The room smelled faintly of bleach and old textbooks, the kind that hadn't been opened in years. Rows of tables stretched out in front of me, each one seating 4, and I picked a spot near the middle, left side, all the way at the end. Safe, I thought. Invisible. That's when he sat down next to me, a guy who seemed awkward even in the way he moved, like he wasn't sure where his limbs belonged. He was a little heavy, with a patchy beard that looked more like a mistake than a style choice, and he carried this vibe like he spent too much time online. But he knew chemistry. God, did he know it? I caught him scribbling equations in his notebook before the professor even started, and I remember thinking, maybe this won't be so bad if he's here. My chest was tight that first day, though. I wasn't just worried about failing, I was terrified of standing out for all the wrong reasons. I'd barely made friends since moving to campus, and the idea of bombing this class in front of everyone made my stomach churn. He noticed me struggling right away, fumbling with the periodic table like it was a foreign language. "Need help?" he asked, his voice low and hesitant. I nodded, grateful but guarded. I didn't want to owe anyone anything, not yet. Weeks passed, and I leaned on him more than I meant to. He didn't just help, he took over. Homework I couldn't finish? He'd do it, sliding the answers across the table with a shy little smile. Tests I was doomed to fail? He'd tilt his paper just enough for me to peek, no questions asked. At first, it felt like a lifeline. I'd been drowning in that class, and he was the only thing keeping my head above water. My grades climbed. An A, steady and unshakable, and I told myself it was fine. Everyone cheats a little in college, right? But every time he handed me something, that smile lingered a bit longer, and I started to feel it. A weight settling over me, like I'd signed a contract I didn't understand. I hated how much I needed him. Every answered question, every copied test, it chipped away at me. I'd sit there in class, staring at the whiteboard, pretending I followed along, while my mind screamed, "You're a fraud." He didn't seem to mind, though. He'd ramble about chemical bonds or whatever, his voice soft but insistent, like he was trying to fill the silence between us. I'd nod, half listening, my thoughts drifting to how I'd gotten in so deep. I gave him my number one day, stupidly, casually, because he said it'd be easier to send me notes. "Cool," he'd said, tapping it into his phone like it was no big deal. But it was. I felt it shift right then, even if I couldn't name it. The last day of class rolled around, and the room buzzed with relief. People were laughing, planning parties, talking about summer. I just wanted out of that stifling lab, away from the guilt that clung to me like damp clothes. I was packing my bag, zipping it up fast when he turned to me. "Hey," he said, his voice cracking a little, "you want to grab something to eat after this? Like, a date?" My heart stopped. A date? With him? I didn't see him that way, not even close. He was a tool, a crutch, not someone I'd ever choose. But he'd carried me through that semester, and the words caught in my throat. I panicked, my mind scrambling for an escape. I can't," I lied. "I'm heading to Miami for a couple weeks. Family stuff." His face didn't change much, just a quick nod, a mumbled, "cool," but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Disappointment? Doubt? I couldn't tell, and I didn't want to. I felt sick, not just from the lie, but from the sudden realization that I'd misread him completely. All those months I'd thought he was just awkward, harmless. Now I wasn't so sure. I bolted out of there as soon as the professor dismissed us, my sneakers squeaking on the tile floor, my pulse racing like I'd dodged something awful. I told myself it was over. Class was done. I'd never have to see him again. I should have known it wouldn't end that easily. That night, I went out with friends. Real friends, the kind who didn't keep score. We hit a bar downtown, some loud, crowded place with neon lights and cheap beer. I was a commuter, not a dorm kid, so after the last day, I figured I was free. A couple drinks in, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out, laughing at something my friend said, and saw his number. "When you heading to Miami?" it read. My buzz soured instantly. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the screen. He's just curious, I told myself. I typed back, "Tomorrow, short and sharp," hoping that'd kill it. But then another came. And then, You're ignoring me now that you don't need me, huh? My chest tightened. I showed my friends, trying to laugh it off. This guy's clingy, right? But their faces mirrored the unease creeping up my spine. I texted back, "Sorry, been packing," and shoved the phone away. Later, out at another spot, it buzzed again. "This thought you said you were leaving tonight." My drink slipped in my hand, ice clinking against the glass. How did he know I was still here? I scanned the bar, the faces blurring into shadows, half expecting to see him lurking in a corner. "What do you mean?" I typed, my fingers clumsy. "Nothing, forget it," he replied. "I just don't like liars." That word hit me like a slap. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was spinning, fear clawing at me, whispering that I wasn't safe anymore. I got home late, around 1 a.m., my head fuzzy from the drinks and the weight of those texts. I kicked off my shoes, the house dark and empty, my parents were out of town, and I was about to collapse when it happened. A knock. Slow, deliberate, echoing through the silence. My stomach dropped. "Who is it?" I called, my voice shaky, praying it was a neighbor or a mistake. "It's me," he said, calm as anything. My blood turned to ice. I backed away from the door, my bare feet cold on the hardwood, my mind screaming, "How does he know where I live?" I'd never told him. Never. "Go away," I yelled, louder than I meant, "or my dad'll come out and deal with you." A lie, but it worked. He didn't knock again. I stood there, trembling, waiting for the next sound, but it didn't come. Then my phone lit up. A wall of text, long and rambling, poured in at 3 a.m. I read it, my breath catching with every line. He said I'd used him, lied to him, hurt him. That he'd felt chemistry between us. His stupid pun made me nauseous, and that I'd looked at him a certain way in class. He demanded one date, just one, like I owed him my soul for those damn homework sheets. "I can come back," he wrote. "We can talk in person." My skin crawled. I forwarded it to everyone, friends, family, not caring how late it was. I called my dad, sobbing into the phone, and he took over, sending threats of his own. I went to the police the next day, filed a report, my hands shaking as I handed over the messages. They tried contacting him, calls, texts, but he ghosted, vanished. And that was it. He never showed up again. Not on campus, not at my door. The police couldn't track him down, and my dad's furious voicemails went unanswered. It's like he evaporated, leaving nothing but those words burned into my head. I told myself I was lucky. Lucky he backed off. Lucky I'd escaped whatever he'd planned. But it didn't feel like luck. It felt like a shadow I couldn't shake. For weeks, I'd check my locks twice, jump at every late-night noise, wondering if he was out there, watching, waiting for me to slip up. I stopped trusting people after that, stopped letting anyone get too close. How could I, when a favor turned into a nightmare? Now, months later, I still catch myself looking over my shoulder. I don't know where he went, don't know if he's forgotten me or if he's just biding his time. That semester, I got my A, but I lost something else. Something I can't name but feel every time I'm alone. The worst part? I can still picture his face, that awkward smile, and wonder how I didn't see it coming. Maybe I did. Maybe I just didn't want to believe it until it was too late. Back then, I was just another junior at Willow Creek High, living in this quiet little town in Oregon with my mom and pops. It was the kind of place where nothing big ever happened. Until that night. Me and my crew, Sarah, Mike, and Lily, had this wild idea to sneak into the school after dark. We'd heard stories about the old basement, how it used to be some chem lab that burned down in the 80s. People said weird stuff went down there, but we figured it was just small-town gossip. That night, after the big basketball game, the whole town was dead asleep. We met up under this huge oak tree by the school's rusty fence, our breath fogging up in the cold air. I was pumped, but part of me felt off, like maybe this wasn't the brightest plan. Sarah was grinning like a kid on Christmas, Mike kept cracking dumb jokes, and Lily was fidgeting with her hoodie strings. "You sure about this, Jake?" she asked, her voice low. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "What's the worst that could happen? We get caught and grounded?" They laughed, but it didn't shake that weird knot in my stomach. We hopped the short fence easy enough, though my sneakers snagged on the top for a sec. Mike found this busted basement window, same one kids had been whispering about for years. It was low to the ground, half hidden by weeds, and the glass was cracked wide open. I crouched down, shining my phone's flashlight through it. The beam caught dust swirling in the air, and I got a whiff of something stale, like old chemicals and damp concrete. "Looks creepy as hell," Sarah whispered, nudging me. I nodded, but I was already sliding the wooden plank we'd brought over the ledge to pry it wider. My hands were sweaty, slipping a little on the splintered wood. One by one, we squeezed through. First Mike, then Sarah, then Lily. I went last, scraping my elbow on the frame as I dropped down inside. My feet hit the floor with a soft thud, and I stood up, brushing dirt off my jeans. The basement was a mess. Old lab tables sat crooked, covered in rust and broken glass. A couple of faded science posters hung limp on the walls, curling at the edges like they'd given up. My flashlight swept over an overturned chair, then a shelf of cracked beakers. It felt like stepping into a tomb, cold, quiet, and way too still. I turned to the group, keeping my voice low. "All right, let's split up and check it out. Don't go too far." Sarah and Mike headed toward a shadowy corner where a rickety staircase climbed up to the main floor. Lily wandered over to some busted cabinets, poking around like she'd find treasure. Me? I stayed near the window, keeping an eye on the way out, just in case. The air down here was heavy, and that dripping sound started up somewhere in the dark. Drip, drip, steady like a clock ticking. It made my skin crawl, but I shook it off. Probably just a leaky pipe, I muttered to myself, gripping my phone tighter. Then I saw it, a shadow moving near the stairs. Tall, kinda lanky, like Mike. "Hey, you going up already?" I called out, keeping my voice casual. The figure didn't answer, just nodded once and slipped up the steps. I hesitated, glancing back at the window. Lily was still rummaging through junk, and I couldn't see Sarah or Mike anymore. That knot in my gut twisted harder, but I figured I'd follow. "Wait up," I said under my breath, stepping toward the stairs. The stairs creaked under my weight, each one groaning like it might snap. My flashlight barely cut through the gloom, just enough to see the chipped paint peeling off the walls. I didn't know it yet, but something was already wrong. Real wrong. Whatever I was following, it wasn't Mike, and by the time I hit the top step, there was no turning back. I reached the top of those creaky stairs, stepping into the main hallway of Willow Creek High. Up here, it was pitch black, no flickering exit signs, no leftover lights like you'd expect in a school at night. Just darkness swallowing everything. My phone's flashlight cut a thin beam ahead, bouncing off the lockers lining the walls. They looked different in the dark. Taller, almost like they were leaning in, watching me. I took a shaky breath and called out, "Mike? You up here, man?" No answer. Just my voice echoing down the empty hall, sounding small and lost. I figured he'd gone ahead, maybe messing with me like he always did. Mike loved pulling pranks, jumping out from corners, that kind of crap. So I kept walking, my sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. The air felt colder up here, heavier somehow, like the school was holding its breath. I swung my light around, catching glimpses of classroom doors shut tight, a trophy case with cracked glass, and a bulletin board with flyers flapping loose in some draft I couldn't feel. "Come on, dude, quit screwing around," I muttered, half annoyed, half nervous. That dripping from the basement was still going, faint but steady, like it was following me. I stopped for a sec, listening hard. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Not mine. They were soft, deliberate, coming from somewhere down the hall. My chest tightened, and I swung my light toward the sound. Nothing. Just shadows stretching long and jagged across the floor. "Mike?" I called again, louder this time. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment it was dead quiet. Then they started again, closer now. I told myself it was one of the others, Sarah or Lily maybe, coming up to join us. But something felt wrong. The steps didn't sound right, not the quick shuffle of Mike's boots or Sarah's bouncy stride. These were heavier, slower, like someone dragging their feet. I took a step back, my light shaking in my hand. "Guys, this isn't funny," I said, my voice cracking a little. No response. Just those damn steps getting louder, echoing off the lockers like a drumbeat in my skull. Then my phone buzzed, nearly making me drop it. Sarah's name lit up the screen. I fumbled to answer, pressing it to my ear. "Jake, where the hell are you?" she hissed, her voice tight. I'm upstairs, I whispered back, eyes darting down the hall. I followed Mike up here. There was a pause. Then Sarah's voice came sharp and loud through the speaker. Mike's right here with me. Lily too. We're still in the basement. I froze. Mike's voice cut in. Yo, Jake, what's up? Followed by Lily's quick hey. My stomach dropped like I'd missed a step going downstairs. If you're all down there, I trailed off, my mouth dry. I swung my light back down the hall, and that's when I heard it, a low, raspy chuckle. Not Mike's goofy laugh, not Sarah's giggle. This was different, cold, like it didn't belong to anyone I knew. It came from the end of the hall, near the boys' bathroom. My legs felt like lead, but I started walking toward it, slow, like something was pulling me. Who's there? I croaked, barely above a whisper. The chuckle stopped, and the footsteps picked up again, heading right for that door. I reached the bathroom, my flashlight shaking so bad the beam danced across the walls. The door was cracked open, just enough to see a sliver of black inside. I pushed it with my fingertips, and it swung in slow, groaning on its hinges. The air hit me, damp, sour, like wet metal. My light caught the edge of a sink, water dripping from the faucet in a slow, steady rhythm. Drip, drip. I stepped inside, my heart pounding so loud I could feel it in my ears. Hello? I said, barely a sound. Then I saw it, a shadow shifting behind one of the stalls, tall and still, waiting. I stood there, frozen, staring at that shadow. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, just loomed there, darker than the dark around it. My phone was still in my hand, Sarah's voice buzzing faintly from the call I hadn't hung up. Jake? Jake, you okay? She was saying, but I couldn't answer. Whatever was in that stall, it wasn't Mike. It wasn't any of us. And deep down, I knew it'd been waiting for me to come up here all along. I stood there in the bathroom, my flashlight locked on that shadow behind the stall. It didn't budge, just hovered there, tall and wrong, like a cutout from a nightmare. My phone was buzzing in my hand, Sarah's voice a faint, panicked hum. Jake, what's happening? Answer me. But I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The air felt thick, pressing down on me, and that dripping from the sink kept going. Drip, drip, like it was counting down to something. I swallowed hard, my throat dry as sandpaper, and managed to choke out, Who's there? The shadow twitched, just a little, like it heard me. Then I heard it, a rustling, slow at first, then sharper, like something heavy shifting on the floor. My light caught the edge of the stall door as it creaked open an inch, and I saw a hand, long, bony, with nails jagged and black, curling around the frame. My stomach flipped, and I stumbled back, my sneaker squeaking loud against the tiles. Oh, God, I whispered, my voice shaking. That wasn't a hand you'd see on a person. Not anyone alive, anyway. Before I could even think, the stall door swung wide, slamming against the wall with a bang that echoed through the room. There it was, tall, hunched, its head tilted at an angle that made my skin crawl. The flashlight hit its face, and I swear my heart stopped. No nose, no mouth, just two white, empty eyes staring right through me, glowing like they were sucking in the light. I screamed, a raw, ripped-out sound, and my phone slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor. The screen spun, lighting up those bare, filthy feet stepping closer. I turned and bolted, my legs moving before my brain caught up. The door was still open, and I threw myself through it, slamming into the hallway wall so hard my shoulder burned. Behind me, I heard it, those heavy, dragging footsteps, thumping fast now, chasing me. My flashlight was gone, lost with my phone, so I ran blind, hands scraping along the lockers for balance. Sarah! Mike! I yelled, my voice cracking into the dark. The footsteps were right behind me, close enough I could feel the air shift, like something cold brushing my neck. I hit the stairs, half running, half falling, my hands clawing at the railing as I crashed down to the basement. The wood groaned under me, and I prayed it wouldn't snap. Guys! Get out! Now! I shouted, my voice bouncing off the damp walls below. I could hear them down there, Sarah's sharp gasp, Mike swearing, Lily's quick footsteps scrambling toward the window. I didn't dare look back, but I felt it. That thing was still coming, its steps pounding the stairs now, shaking the whole frame. I burst into the basement, the air hitting me like a slap, wet and sour. Mike was already boosting Lily up to the window, her hands scrabbling at the ledge. Sarah grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "What the hell's after you?" she yelled, her eyes wide. "Just go." I shoved her toward the window, turning just enough to see it, the shadow filling the stairwell, those white eyes glinting in the dark. Mike hoisted himself up next, then reached back for Sarah. I was last, my hands slipping on the frame as I hauled myself out, the cold night air stinging my lungs. I hit the ground outside, rolling into the weeds, and scrambled to my feet. The others were already up, panting, staring back at the window. I followed their gaze, and there it was, standing just inside, pressed against the busted frame. Those white eyes locked on us, unblinking, and its hand, God, that hand reached out, scraping the edge of the glass like it was testing it. "Run!" Mike hissed, and we did, tearing across the lawn, my chest burning, my mind screaming that it wasn't over. We didn't stop until we hit the street, the school looming behind us like a black mountain. I bent over, hands on my knees, gasping for air. Sarah was shaking, Mike muttering curses under his breath, Lily clutching her hoodie like it'd protect her. "What was that?" Lily finally whispered, her voice barely there. I couldn't answer, just kept staring back at that window, waiting for those eyes to move. They didn't, but I knew, deep down, they were still watching. We stood there on the empty street, a good 100 yards from Willow Creek High, the school's dark shape squatting under the moon like it was daring us to look back. My lungs burned, my shirt clung to my back with sweat, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Sarah was next to me, her arms crossed tight, staring at the ground like she could unsee it all. Mike paced a few steps, muttering, "No way, no freaking way," over and over. Lily just leaned against a street lamp, her face pale, eyes flicking back toward the school every few seconds. None of us wanted to say it out loud, but we all knew we'd just run from something that wasn't human. I forced myself to turn around, squinting through the dark. The basement window was still there, a black hole in the side of the building. And then I saw it, those hands again, pressed flat against the glass, long fingers spread wide like they were feeling for a way out. Those white eyes glowed faint, locked on us, steady and unblinking. "It's still there," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. I nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. Mike stopped pacing and grabbed my shoulder. "We gotta get out of here, Jake. Now." We took off again, not sprinting this time, but fast enough to put distance between us and that thing. The streetlights flickered as we passed, casting our shadows long and warped across the pavement. Nobody said a word, just kept moving until we hit the edge of town, piling into Mike's beat-up truck parked near the gas station. He fumbled the keys, cursing under his breath, then peeled out, tires squealing. I twisted in the back seat, watching the school shrink in the rear window. No lights followed us, no footsteps. But I couldn't shake the feeling those eyes were still on me. We ended up at Sarah's place. Her folks were out of town, and none of us wanted to be alone. Huddled in her living room, we tried to piece it together. "What the hell was that thing?" Mike asked, his voice low, like he didn't really want an answer. Lily hugged her knees on the couch, staring at the floor. "It wasn't a janitor or some creep. Did you see its face? Those eyes?" Sarah shivered, pulling a blanket tighter around her. "It knew we were there, Jake. It wanted us to see it." I didn't say anything, just sat there, replaying it all. The shadow on the stairs, the hand, those damn eyes. Nobody slept that night. We kept the lights on, the TV blaring some late-night rerun to drown out the silence. But around 3 a.m., I got curious, stupid curious. I grabbed Sarah's laptop and started digging. Willow Creek High, basement fire, 1980s. Took a while, but I found it, an old newspaper article, grainy and half-faded online. "Lab fire claims custodian," it said. "Guy named Harold Vance. Worked nights, went missing after the blaze. No body ever found." The school rebuilt over it, locked the basement up, called it a tragedy. I read it out loud and the room went quiet. "You think that was him?" Lily whispered. I didn't know what to think. Harold Vance, or whatever that thing was, didn't feel like just a ghost story. Ghosts don't chase you. They don't press their hands on glass like they're measuring you up. We swore we'd never tell anyone, not our parents, not the cops. Who'd believe us? But a few days later, I had to know. I went back, alone, in daylight, just to check. The window was still busted, the basement still dark. No eyes, no hands. I almost convinced myself we'd imagined it. Almost. Then I saw it, scratched into the concrete under the window, fresh, deep marks like someone clawed at it with those jagged nails. My breath caught and I backed up fast. That night I couldn't sleep, kept my curtains shut, my door locked. But around midnight I heard it, faint, so faint I thought I was dreaming. A tap, tap, on my window. I didn't look, didn't move, just lay there, eyes wide, waiting for it to stop. It did, eventually, but I knew, whatever we'd found in that basement, it hadn't forgotten us. Next morning, I checked outside. No marks, no footprints, just the cold glass staring back at me. I never went near the school again, not at night, not ever. But sometimes when it's quiet, I swear I hear it. That tapping, soft and patient, like it's still out there waiting for me to come back. Weeks passed after that night, but it didn't feel like it was over. Willow Creek went back to its sleepy routine. Kids at school laughed about the game, teachers droned on about homework, and the leaves kept falling like nothing had happened. But for me, everything was different. I'd catch myself staring out windows too long, jumping at shadows in the corner of my eye. Sarah stopped talking about it. Mike threw himself into basketball like he could outrun it. And Lily, well, she started skipping school, saying she didn't feel safe there anymore. We drifted apart, like whatever we saw that night had cut something between us. I tried to let it go. Told myself it was just a freak scare, a trick of the dark, but that tapping stuck with me. Tap, tap. It'd come some nights, faint as a whisper, always when I was alone. I'd lie there in bed, blankets pulled tight, telling myself it was branches on the glass, the house settling, anything but what I knew it was. My room faced the backyard, no trees close enough to reach, no reason for it. Still, I never opened the curtains to check. Couldn't bring myself to. Whatever was out there, I didn't want to give it the satisfaction of seeing me look. One night, maybe a month later, it got worse. I was up late, cramming for a history test, my desk lamp throwing a weak glow across the room. The house was quiet, Mom and Pop's asleep downstairs, the TV off for once. Then it started again. Tap, tap, tap. Louder this time, sharper, like nails on glass instead of fingertips. My pencil froze mid-word, and I held my breath, waiting. It stopped, and I thought maybe that was it. But then, a scratch. Slow, deliberate, dragging down the window pane like someone testing how thick it was. My heart slammed against my ribs, and I dropped the pencil, watching it roll off the desk. I stood up fast, chair scraping the floor, and stared at the curtains. They were closed, heavy blue ones Mom picked out years ago, but I saw them shift, just a little, like something pressed against the other side. "This isn't happening," I muttered, backing toward the door. The scratching stopped, and for a second, it was dead silent. Then a voice, low, raspy, barely there, came through the glass. "Jake," it said, stretching my name out like a hiss. My blood turned to ice. It knew me. That thing, whatever it was, knew my name. I bolted out of my room, slamming the door behind me, and ran downstairs. I didn't care if I woke anyone. I just needed light, noise, anything to drown it out. I flipped on every switch in the living room, the kitchen, even the porch, until the house blazed like midday. Mom stumbled out in her robe, rubbing her eyes. "Jake, what's wrong?" she asked, voice groggy. I couldn't tell her, not the truth. "Bad dream," I lied, my hands still trembling. She frowned, but didn't push, just shuffled back to bed. Pops didn't even stir. I didn't go back to my room that night, slept on the couch with the TV blaring infomercials, the lights on till dawn. When morning came, I had to check. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and crept outside, the grass wet under my sneakers. My window was up there, second floor, no ladder, no way up without climbing the drain pipe. I aimed the beam at the glass, expecting scratches, cracks, something. Nothing, just clean, cold glass reflecting the gray sky. I let out a shaky laugh. Maybe I was losing it. But then I looked down. Under the window, in the dirt, were marks. Not footprints. Too shallow, too narrow. More like claw marks, dug in deep, fanning out like something had crouched there, waiting. My laugh died in my throat, and I backed up, flashlight slipping in my sweaty grip. That's when I noticed it. My window was cracked open, just an inch, the lock unhooked from the inside. I hadn't touched it. No one had. I ran back in, slammed it shut, and jammed a chair under my bedroom door that night. You have experienced a different life, a phenomenon that you cannot explain. Why? If so, share your story in the comments section below because someone out there has also experienced the same thing. Don't be afraid to like the video, subscribe to the channel because the next story could be even more interesting. Share your story. It was early September, my first day of senior year, except it wasn't supposed to be. I'd failed enough classes to get held back, so here I was, 19 years old, walking into a rural New Brunswick school where the middle and high school shared the same tired, brick building. The air smelled like damp earth and pine, the kind of heavy scent that clings to you. I felt out of place, towering over freshmen who still had that wide-eyed look I'd lost years ago. Study hall was first period, and I slouched into a desk near the back, trying to blend in with the chipped wood and faded posters. That's when I saw him. A new kid, sitting alone across the room, his head down, scribbling something. I don't know why I cared, but I did. Maybe it was the way he didn't fit either, like me. So I got up, crossed the room, and introduced myself. He looked up, eyes dark and unreadable, and said he'd just moved here. Simple enough. I offered to show him around, figuring it was the decent thing to do. But even then, something felt off. His voice was flat, like he was reading lines, and I caught myself wondering why he'd landed in this nowhere town. Still, I brushed it aside. New kids are weird sometimes, right? The bell rang, and I led him through the school's narrow halls. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering every few steps, casting shadows that stretched too long. I pointed out the cafeteria, the gym, the English hallway, basic stuff. He nodded, hands shoved in his pockets, asking things like how long I'd been here or where the bathrooms were. Normal questions, but his tone was too steady, too curious. Then, out of nowhere, he asked for my address. My stomach did a little flip. Why? I laughed it off, awkward, and changed the subject. He didn't push, just smirked faintly and kept walking. I gave him my Snapchat instead. Harmless, I thought, a way to keep it casual. Inside, though, I was replaying his words, that blunt, "Where do you live?" looping in my head. Who asks that 5 minutes after meeting someone? By the time we split for our next classes, I was second-guessing myself. He seemed lonely, sure, but there was an edge to him I couldn't place. I told myself I was overthinking it, just a weird kid trying to make friends. Last period was English, a low-level class with barely a dozen kids. I slumped into my seat, flipping open a book I wouldn't read. When I felt it, eyes on me. I turned my head, just a quick glance, and there he was, sitting across the room. He was eating a sandwich, some soggy mess of bread and meat, staring right at me. His jaw worked slowly, and when our eyes met, he raised a hand, motioning me over. My teacher was droning on about Shakespeare, so I ignored him, burying my face in the book. 5 minutes later, I peeked again. He was still staring, harder now, his expression tighter, like I'd offended him. My phone buzzed, a Snapchat. "Follow me," it said. I typed back, "Can't, we're in class," and tried to focus on the page. Then I saw him stand, ask to use the bathroom, and slip out. Curiosity gnawed at me. What did he want? Against my better judgment, I waited a few minutes and asked to go too. Out in the hall, I spotted him, 50 feet ahead, walking slow, deliberate, like he knew I'd come. My chest tightened, but I followed anyway, hanging back so he wouldn't see me. He turned down a hallway we never used, dim, lined with storage closets and a rusty bathroom no one bothered with. I stayed quiet, my sneakers barely tapping the floor, watching as he stopped at a door. It was the basement entrance, a heavy metal thing with peeling paint and a faint hum coming from below. He pushed it open and disappeared inside, the door clanging shut behind him. I crept closer, heart thudding, and pressed my ear to the metal. A faint sound drifted up, chewing, wet and steady, like he was still eating that damn sandwich down there. My mind raced. Why the basement? What was he doing? Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but I stood there, frozen, picturing him waiting in the dark. Then my phone buzzed again. "Why didn't you come down?" It read. A chill crawled up my spine. I typed, "Leave me alone," blocked him, and bolted back to class, my pulse hammering in my ears. Back in my seat, I couldn't focus. His message stuck with me. How did he know I was there? I kept seeing that door in my head, the black stairwell beyond it, and him somewhere inside. I got home late, around 11 p.m., after wrestling with homework. The house was empty. My parents out somewhere, my sister probably with her boyfriend. I locked the front door, dropped my bag, and headed upstairs, the quiet settling over me like a blanket. My room was my safe spot. Posters on the walls, a messy bed, the glow of my phone as I scrolled through videos. Then a Snapchat notification popped up. A new friend request. Why didn't you enter the basement? My breath caught. It was him. I blocked it, hands shaky, but another came. Why'd you block me? Blocked that too. Then another. I know where you live. My stomach dropped. I'm right outside your house, the next one said, and right then I heard it. A sharp crash downstairs, glass shattering. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911, and whispered to the operator, "Someone's breaking in." She told me to hide. I stumbled into the hallway, ducked into the closet, and pulled the door shut, my heart slamming so hard I thought it'd burst. I crouched behind a box, barely breathing, as footsteps climbed the stairs. Through a crack in the door, I saw him. Tall, thin, standing at the end of the hall. He turned his head toward the closet, and I swore he smiled. He stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the floor. I pressed myself deeper into the corner, my hands trembling so bad I nearly dropped the phone. He reached the closet, grabbed the handle, and yanked it open. Light from the hall spilled in, but he didn't flip the switch, just stood there, peering into the dark. I held my breath, eyes locked on his silhouette, praying he wouldn't see me. He muttered something low, unintelligible, then turned away. His footsteps faded downstairs, and seconds later a loud knock rattled the front door. Cops. I bolted out, flung it open, and spilled everything. The texts, the break-in, the basement. They searched the house, found a broken window in the basement, glass scattered across the concrete. He'd climbed out and vanished. My knees buckled as I sank onto the couch, the adrenaline crashing out of me. The cops took my phone, promised to trace the accounts, but I could tell they didn't fully believe me. I barely believed it myself. Next day, I dragged myself to school, still shaky, and went straight to the principal. I told him everything. The new kid, the basement, the break-in. He frowned, flipped through some files, then looked up. "There's no student here by that name," he said. "No record of anyone new this year." My blood ran cold. They checked the security footage later, caught him sneaking in through a back entrance, blending into the crowd like he'd always been there. No one knew who he was, where he came from, or where he went. The police never found him either. I sat in my room that night, staring at the closet door, replaying it all. His stare in class, that basement door, the way he stood in my hall. Was he real? A drifter? Something else? It's been months now, and he hasn't come back. But I still lock every door, check every window. I don't know what he wanted down in that basement or why he picked me. All I know is he was there, real enough to break into my life. And that's enough to keep me awake, wondering if he's still out there, waiting for me to follow him into the dark. It was my sophomore year, and I'd scored a single dorm room tucked away in a forgotten corner of the residence hall. The place was perfect for me, far enough from the chatter of the main floor that I could study in peace, but close enough to still hear the hum of life from the other students. The hallway leading to my door bent at a sharp angle, cutting me off from view, and an old emergency exit staircase sat just beyond my room, rusted and rarely used. I liked the solitude. At least I did at first. That night, I was up late cramming for a bio exam, the glow of my desk lamp casting long shadows across the walls. My eyes were burning, but I kept pushing through until I heard it. A faint tapping on my door. Tap, tap, tap. It was so soft I almost missed it, like someone brushing their knuckles against the wood, testing if I'd notice. I froze, pen hovering over my notebook, and called out, "Come in." No answer. The tapping stopped. I waited, ears straining, but all I heard was the faint whistle of wind from the stairwell. I got up, my chair scraping the floor, and opened the door. The hallway was empty, the flickering fluorescent lights stretching shadows down the corridor. I stepped out, peering around the corner toward the main hall. Nothing. No one. I laughed it off. Probably some freshman pulling a prank. But as I shut the door and sat back down, a chill crawled up my spine. Something felt off. The next night, I turned off my lamp and crawled into bed, exhausted from the day. The room was pitch black, the only light a faint sliver of orange sneaking through the blinds from the parking lot outside. I just started drifting off when it came again. Tap, tap, tap. Louder this time, more deliberate, like someone was standing right outside, waiting. My heart jolted, and I lay there, staring at the ceiling, hoping it'd stop. It didn't. "Who's there?" I called, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. The tapping cut off instantly, leaving a silence so thick it pressed against my chest. I didn't move at first, telling myself it was nothing, just the building settling, or my tired mind playing tricks. But the longer I lay there, the more I couldn't shake it. What if someone was out there, watching me? I threw off the blanket and swung the door open, faster this time. The hallway stretched out, empty as before, the emergency exit door at the end barely visible in the dim light. I stepped out, my bare feet cold against the tile, and checked the corner again. Still nothing. But as I turned back, I noticed my window, cracked open just an inch. I swore I'd locked it earlier. A gust of cold air slipped through, carrying a stale, musty smell that made my stomach twist. I slammed it shut, locked it tight, and climbed back into bed, pulling the covers over my head like a kid scared of the dark. By the third night, I was a wreck. I hadn't slept right, and every creak in the building made me jump. I crashed early, hoping to catch a few hours before the nightmares kicked in. But at 3 a.m., it hit again. Bang! 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 The knocks were heavy now, rattling the door in its frame, like someone was pounding with their fist. I shot up, heart hammering, sweat beading on my forehead. This wasn't a prank anymore. This was real. "Who is it?" I yelled, but my voice cracked, betraying the fear clawing at me. No answer, just silence, thick and suffocating. I couldn't take it anymore. Anger surged over the panic, and I stumbled out of bed, ripping the door open the second the last knock faded. I caught it, a shadow, tall and lanky, slipping around the far corner of the hall. My breath hitched, but I ran after it, bare feet slapping the cold floor. The main hallway was a tunnel of flickering light, the bulbs buzzing overhead. I reached the end just in time to see the bathroom door swinging shut, slow and heavy. My chest tightened. Whoever it was, they were in there. I stood frozen for a second, hands trembling, mind racing. Should I go back? Call someone? But the thought of letting this creep get away fueled me. I had to know who or what was messing with me. I shoved the bathroom door open, the hinges groaning, and flipped the switch. The fluorescent lights buzzed to life, bathing the room in a harsh, sterile glow. 2 stalls stood against the wall, both doors closed tight. My breath echoed in the silence as I stepped forward, the tiles freezing under my feet. I dropped to my knees, peering under the stalls. In the second one, boots, black, heavy, scuffed-up boots, standing perfectly still. I swallowed hard, my pulse roaring in my ears, and pushed the stall door open. It swung wide, and I stared, dumbfounded. The boots were there, alone, no legs, no body, just sitting on the floor like someone had left them behind. My mind scrambled for an explanation, but then it came, a low, raspy chuckle rolling out from behind me. It wasn't a kid's laugh, not even a woman's. It was deep, jagged, like an old man who'd lost his mind years ago. I spun around, but the bathroom was empty. The sound bounced off the walls, growing louder, closer, until it felt like it was right in my ear. I bolted, legs shaking, and sprinted back to my room, the laughter chasing me down the hall. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and sank to the floor, chest heaving. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. What the hell was that? Was I losing it? Or was someone, really out there, toying with me? I didn't sleep after that. I stayed huddled on my bed, knees to my chest, staring at the door. Around 4 a.m., it started again. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, deliberate, like whatever was out there knew I wouldn't open it this time. It went on for half a minute, each knock sinking deeper into my skull before it stopped. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just sat there, texting every friend I had, begging someone to wake up and tell me I wasn't crazy. No one answered. Morning came, gray and heavy through the window. I dragged myself out to ask the others on my floor. Had they heard it? Seen anything? They all shook their heads, looking at me like I'd lost it. "No knocking here, man," one guy said, half laughing. "You sure it wasn't a dream?" I wanted to believe them, to chalk it up to stress or exhaustion. But I knew what I'd heard, what I'd seen. A week later, I was heading out when I passed the emergency stairwell. Something caught my eye. A pair of boots, black and scuffed, tucked in the corner under a layer of dust. They looked exactly like the ones in the bathroom. My stomach dropped. I didn't touch them. Didn't even get close. I just turned and walked away, faster than I meant to. Now, every time I pass that hallway, I swear I hear it. That low, broken chuckle, faint and far off, like it's waiting for me to turn around. I don't know who or what picked my door to knock on. I don't know why. But some nights, when the wind rattles the window and the building goes quiet, I still feel it watching me, waiting. You have experienced a different life, a phenomenon that you cannot explain. Why? If so, share your story in the comments section below, because someone out there has also experienced the same thing. Don't be afraid to like the video, subscribe to the channel, because the next story could be even more interesting. Share your story.